Shenny De Los Angeles is a Dominican-American spoken word poet, writer, and director. Her work centers Black and Brown Caribbean themes. She directed Sisters by Water, which was selected by the Black Alphabet Film Festival, taking place October 11th through the 13th. Now, stay tuned for my interview with Shenny. For anyone who hasn't watched Sisters by Water, how would you describe it?
It's a coming of age story about two Caribbean American girls confronting their fear of the ocean.
You said ocean, so I want to really jump into it.
Yes.
So I read that it took you 25 years to face the ocean and you would skip pool party invites. What did water represent to you growing up in Central Florida?
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you taking the time to read that, to get to learn about me and be so specific in your question. So I just want to say gratitude to the time and energy towards that. The ocean was just, for me, like, I think it was my first mirror, and yeah, for whatever reason, there's a lot of layers to it. And I think I'm feeling extra protective during this eclipse. So maybe I won't say it all, but yeah, it was my first mirror. And as a kid, I did struggle with some form of body dysmorphia. And so that and shame and things of that nature played a part into like why I wasn't as free as my friends and like excited to be in nature. I used to think nature was like a white person thing, and I had to like heal that and liberate that and understand that it is a very Afro-Indigenous experience to be connected to nature, and we need it in order to heal, to love ourselves, to love others, to understand how to be in community, to understand how to be alone. Like it's just a part, you can't be without it.
Okay. I was not expecting that answer at all. But I love what you said that nature allows us to be in community and you can learn how to be in a group setting or alone. And so this is kind of like going away from my follow-up question, but with like nature, I feel like there's so many rituals that maybe our ancestors participated in. And so I'm curious about your relationship with ritual performance. Is there anything kind of like nature specific within that?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's another very layered question. I think it's expanded a lot since I made Sisters and before I did Sisters. For context, for folks who may be watching, I used to do live performance and ritual work in that way before I transitioned into film. But to answer your question, like even right now, I'm in post-production for a film I made about wildfires. And that required a lot of research. And in my research, I learned that the indigenous practice to make sure that wildfires wouldn't happen is actually starting a controlled burn. And like we need basically what a lot of farmers were saying is like, we can't deny fire. We have to embrace her. So that's an example of how I can take something that is actually like just factually, we need this thing, but then also creating a story where it's a little bit more poetic and we're not actually seeing a controlled burn, but we're seeing like a ring of fire and we're seeing, we're finding, I always try to find ways to bring in what I learn about indigenous practice. In this case, it was about climate change, but in other ways with Sisters, it was about healing. So I learned through my own spiritual practice, a part of the ritual to healing is like you do have to make offerings to the ocean. And so you do see that moment of this aunt, these two young kids witnessing her giving fruits to the ocean, giving sunflowers to the ocean. And so that is an example specifically to Sisters in which I took a real life experience of learning through a spiritual mentor and things I had to do myself when I was 25 that I incorporated in the film because I felt that specificity to my people, to my community would be understood. So that's an example of how I take rituals into any form of my work whether performance or film.
You kind of spoke to this, but I'm curious what inspired you to write the film?
At the time, I had just seen there's again, it's like, I love this. It's a question that I could answer in so many different ways. I think at the heart of it, was me coming to terms with the fact that Caribbean girls, specifically girls from Haiti, so the indigenous name for DR and Haiti is Haiti, so Dominican and Haitian girls, a lot of what I was noticing in our testimonies that were similar was the ways in which we were hypersexualized, but also taught to fear sex. And was just very complicated. So that's where that came from at first, was like, okay, what happens if you tell a story of two Caribbean girls in their 20s who really, one doesn't really like sex, the other one is confused on whether or not she wants to have it. I just haven't seen that narrative. Most of the times when you do see Dominican and Haitian girls on screen, they're fast, or you know what I mean, or they're experiencing things so aggressively and violently, and nothing necessarily like that happens in this short, but there's a lot of questions. And I think that's just the reality of my life and my girlhood, is a lot of us in our early 20s were asking a lot of questions about our sexuality, about our relationship to sex, based off of the things we were taught, which a lot of us were taught to fear it and taught to think that it wasn't something we would enjoy. So that's where that came from.
The film is gorgeous, by the way, and I want to specifically talk about lighting and the relationship with the characters to lighting. There's this kind of like beautiful images of characters being backlit, and so it gorgeously highlights their skin tones. And so what did that process of figuring out the lighting, like, where did that start? How did those conversations come about?
That's oh my gosh, because we shot that in 2023, so I'm just trying to bring myself back to that world. Honestly, like, all credit to my DP, Stefan. He's super incredible. He taught me a lot in the process. But a lot of those visuals came from me telling him how I wanted it to feel, and him helping me expand that. So as far as like color palette goes, I was explaining to him how the names of the characters are Larimar and Amber, which are two gems found on our island. And I thought it was really beautiful to have that as these two characters' names, because sometimes we see these two gems together formed in jewelry and things of that nature, but they both have their own meaning, story. Gems carry their own healing properties. So we talked about like the aspect of the teals versus and greens and blues versus this aspect of like dark orange and yellows and gold. So that was sort of the start. And I think once we got to the sage moment, the intimacy of that space, it just so happened that, well, actually our set designer, Vince, who's also super brilliant, we actually shot it in my mom and grandmother's home. And in that room, because we were trying to honor this color of amber, our set designer, Vince, painted the wall like this very, very dark orange that almost gives a red energy. And then Stefan also incorporated ideas of bringing in like red curtains. So we had this like ambiance of like warmth during the sage scene. It felt very sensual, but not sexual. So we talked about those things. And then sometimes things were like happy accidents, like as far as like being, when you were talking about the lighting, like I'm thinking about their backs facing us when they're looking at the ocean. Like that's just, or even just like all the water sequences. Like I remember Stefan, our DP, said sometimes God is the best gaffer, and it's just like those were just that was just like nature also playing its part and helping us with the lighting.
And I want to kind of like talk specifically about you. You wrote and directed the film. Do you see yourself as a writer or director first? Like, what gives you the most passion between those two roles?
To be honest, I'm still figuring that out. I think because I'm still working on my confidence. So I think when I'm just being honest about where I'm at, I feel more confident in my writing skills. I'm eager to, shadow shadow other directors and be on other sets, because a lot of my experience has been me just, fortunately getting a grant and being able to try. Is kind of like my way of film school. But there are times where I'm like, maybe I should go and get my master's and learn more properly. And then other more experienced directors are like, you don't need film school, you're already doing it. So it's like that's a question where it's like, if I had more confidence, I would say I'm both equally. I would like to get there. That's the journey that I'm on.
You centralize Black and Brown Caribbean films in your work. How did you discover your reason to create art through this source of inspiration?
The first thing that came to my mind when you were like, as soon as I knew where the question was going. So the first thing that came to my mind was Enozaki Shange. And I consider myself a daughter of Enozaki. So when I was about 13 or 14 years old, I was at a school for the arts here in Central Florida in Kissimmee. And there was actually a Haitian American student named Anne Edouard who was doing For Color Girls as her senior thesis. And she casted me as Lady in Blue. And I remember that was my first time feeling like I was doing text. I started theater in 7th grade. And that was my first time up until that point where I'm like, wow, I'm actually playing somebody that looks like me, that talks like me, that at the time I wasn't enduring the same battles that Lady in Blue was, but I felt it. I came from women who went through that, and it just felt, I was free. I was liberated. I learned how to love poetry through For Color Girls. And I'm always mentioning Enozaki in any interview that I do. God bless her spirit. A lot of the people that I've met that were either mentored by her or got the chance to collaborate with her would always tell me, because I would ask a lot of stories about what was she like. And they said, her biggest thing is like, she just wanted Black girls to feel witnessed, to always feel like they could relate to her work. And I just want to say she did that. And she plants that seed inside of me. So that's where that comes from. Like, I just want Black and brown girls to experience some form of healing when they witness my work. Right now, I'm just on a path of like, I just want to experience healing in the same way that Enozaki gave me. I hope I can do for other girls.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. I'm a part of I've never seen that production live. I really want to. But I'm a part of like a typewriter poetry collective. And anything that deals with poetry, I'm all about it. If you could cast a film featuring all Afro-Latino actors, who would you cast and why?
That's such a wow. I've never been asked that. Not because when I get asked like, name me this, name me that, I blank out a little bit. I'm like, all the names are starting to escape me. If I'm gonna be real with you, like, I would probably like the opportunity to work with any of them that are already at like such a prestigious level, like Jarrell Jerome, would be like an absolute blessing. And there are so many, again, just keeping it real, there are so many Afro-Latinx artists, actors specifically, that people aren't aware of, that I've gotten the chance to work with. So for example, Cristina Encarnacion, who is the lead who plays Amber in my film, I've gotten to work with her twice now, and she's just absolutely brilliant. So I don't know if this is like a more political, I don't know if I'm, my answer is like, I honestly would love to work with actors to put them on the map, people who we haven't seen and witnessed yet. But there are so many brilliant actors, Afro-Latino actors that are doing their thing right now that is like so inspiring to see as well, you know?
Yeah. I also want to ask you this. What was the first film that you saw that made you want to be a better filmmaker?
This is, wow. I didn't know these were going to be, this is so beautiful. Like, for the other filmmakers watching, like, you want to be interviewed by Vic. Like, the intentionality is just so precious that I'm like, oh my gosh. What comes up for me is like, I think I'm working through imposter syndrome right now in real time about being a filmmaker. So when you phrase it like that, I'm like, I guess I am, you know, I made a film, I'm making films. So I guess I just haven't, I don't know if I personally thought to myself, okay, like this is the film that makes me want to make films. But I definitely have experience and watch films that like make me want to also create and like show, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, I'm trying to think, there are so many. I mean, I didn't grow up with this film, but I just saw this film, and what is it called? Eve's Bayou. It was so brilliant and so like ahead of its time. Also, I just got to meet Raven Jackson through a screenwriting residency, and I was so moved by All Dirt Roads. I guess that's the one. When I watched All Dirt Roads, I was like, I would love to make a feature that is like this, that isn't the traditional story arc, that can be these like visual tableaus that are poetic. And that inspired me with this next short that I made. So I guess I could say All Dirt Roads.
I've never seen it, so I'm gonna check it out.
It's brilliant.
Okay. And Eve's Bayou, there's one scene that's very haunting. I saw it when I was much younger. And I want to say it's the young girl is, what's her name? Oh my gosh, she plays in Harlem.
In what?
In Harlem on Amazon Prime.
It's not Megan Good's character.
Oh wait, yeah, Megan Good.
It is? Okay.
Yeah, yes, her character. There's a scene where I want to say she's entering a room, and her body casts a shadow, and then she walks and sits on the lap of Samuel Jackson. Like that scene like made me very uncomfortable as a child. I'm like, what's happening? Because like it was the way that she walked into the room, her body, like the silhouette of her body, and it was sitting on the lap. I was like, what is at that young age, I was like, what is the director trying to convey? Like, what's the message behind this? And it's something that actually, like, I don't remember much about that film, but that one scene like left me with those questions. So I have to revisit that film to see it with adult eyes.
Yeah, because it's just she really went there. The director, Cassie Lemons, I think is how you pronounce it. But I was just so moved that she would tell a story that had such nuance in that way at that time. And apparently there's a director's cut with the whole other character in the family that knew what the truth was. But like the higher ups or like some EP didn't want that character in the story. But there's like, I'm curious to find that version. I just don't know where it exists.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure like you got to get a DVD player and buy it like online.
Exactly.
But yeah, I definitely want to revisit that film. What are like 5 of your favorite films that you could rewatch like every day for the rest of your life?
I don't know about every day. I don't know about every day, but I'm one of those though. It's like, I don't know if my addiction is like that, but I will say like if Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind is playing, like I'm sitting down, I'm watching it, or on the flight, it seems like it's always available. So I'll just play it, even if it's in the background. Like that movie brings me a lot of, I don't know what it is, like nostalgic comfort, because I did watch that one when I was younger too. So yeah, Eternal Sunshine is one. I probably can't name 5 on the spot like this. I gotta think about it. But what's another one? I would also watch All Dirt Roads, like just to study over and over again. There's so many brilliant choices that, you know, Raven Jackson and her team made in that one. What else? My gosh, not putting me on the spot. I'm like, movies, do I watch movies? Yes, you do. What have I seen, or what is a go-to? You know what? This is so random. I know how people feel about J-Lo, but again, this is for comfort. This is for comfort. Some of some of the old stuff she used to do, like it slaps. Like
Okay.
it slaps. Like there's something about it. Like Enough.
Okay.
She ate in that role. So
Okay.
again, like I think when you ask that, I don't know if it's like even for the brilliance, but sometimes the movies I'm watching over and over again, it's a comfort thing. You know,
Okay.
she had one with Mark Anthony about, they were playing real life people, but was he Willie Colon, or I can't remember who he was, but
Okay.
he was like a famous salsero, but I can't remember the name of the film, but like I could watch that one over and over again.
Okay.
Sorry, these are not the best answers, but yeah, I have to think on it. I have to think
Okay.
on it. It's hard.
Okay. I wanted to actually recommend a film to you because
Oh, please do.
the lighting of the skin tones in your film reminds me of this. And actually, it is one of my favorite films. It's a Brazilian film.
Oh.
It's called Madame Seita. And I'm not even going to butcher the director's name, but just Google Madame Seita.
Okay.
And it stars a Black Brazilian. I want to say it's the 30s. And he, grows up. He's very poor. I forget the neighborhood that he's living in, but in order to survive, I won't tell you all the details, but in order to survive, he lives with his 2 best friends, a woman and a man. And something happens later in life, and he discovers what he was meant to do. And the director uses some type of kind of like wash on the film to bring out these kind of like gold, bronze tones for the characters. And so everyone's skin looks beautiful. It's a queer film, and it's based on the life of a real life Brazilian. It's in Portuguese, and it is a film that I could actually watch every single day, because every time I watch it, I see something new that I didn't see before. And I think it came out like mid 2000s. But I do background. I have like 100 jobs, and so I always talk about this film amongst people who I have no idea that are like Brazilian, and so they're like, "Oh my gosh, like that's my favorite film. I love that film." And so it is literally, it's gorgeous. So I recommend it.
I noted it down. I see it here on IMDb. I'm gonna watch. I mean, whenever I go to film festivals, I always seem to connect with the Brazilian filmmakers who are there, and so that's already exciting because they're so great. And yeah, I'm super excited. I was also thinking, Shen, you didn't say Moonlight. Like that's such a film. I've read that script many times. So Jerry Benkins is just one that's just, he's gonna eat it every time. Like that one is brilliant as well. There's so many, but when you're put on the spot, you're like, you start to blink. Yeah.
Don't get me started on Moonlight.
I know.
Okay, so Moonlight was filmed in Miami, and the diner scene is in the Arts District.
Okay.
I always forget the name, but I go there whenever I can, and I pretend like I'm the character sitting in the table.
Yes.
But, I forget the street, but it's literally in the Arts District, and It's like a mom and pop diner. So
Mhm.
I love supporting like mom and pop shops.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I love that place. Oh my gosh, I love Moonlight. I can talk about it forever, but this is about you.
That one
Um,
I could watch forever too.
yeah.
He just did his
Um,
thing. And
so I have one final question for you.
mhm.
Queer history is not taught in schools, and people of color are often erased from history books. Who is one person who is queer or an Afro Latino person who history has forgotten and more people should know about them?
Ooh, man, a part of me is like, should I have gotten these questions beforehand
Ah!
to be prepared to like answer in like the way that could be so full? Because there's so many people, and I just wanna, I'm like, who do I share? I mean, because I'm coming off of this film that I
Yeah,
just made.
yeah,
Maybe it's worth sharing this story,
no.
but and she wasn't queer,
Okay.
or that I know of,
Yeah,
but she was a Black Dominican woman, a farmer, and an abolitionist who was murdered protecting her land and trying to protect other poor Black farmers' lands as well. And her story has stayed with me for a really long time. And so, you know, I told her story through this film in a more experimental way, in talking about climate change. But I think
yeah,
it's worth people knowing, because a lot of the times, you know, especially for Dominicans, this idea that I just think it's important to the conversation, because this idea that that Dominicans on the island don't know they're Black, but there were a lot, and there still are, Black Dominicans who are doing the work, who have been doing the work. And I think it's worth people knowing Mama Tingo's story. So she's the first that comes to mind. As far as like a queer person in history, I mean, we don't know enough. And so that's why I'm like, I wonder who I know that isn't quite popular. I'm also doing a lot of research right now for my next project about Zora Neale Hurston, and I believe she was on the spectrum.
yeah.
She's also from Central Florida, so it's important to know her work too, you know, and what she did for the South, what she did for Florida specifically. And yeah, just what I'm trying to tap into, the bravery, the confidence, like she's worth knowing as well. So those are the two that come to mind.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. I learned so much from asking that question, and specifically Black farmers, you know, all over the world, have had a difficult time protecting their land and keeping their land, especially in this country, where a lot of them have lost their land, uh,
Right.
and their land has been taken. And so I'm actually excited to watch that film
Yes.
that you're working on. Um, and is there anything else that you would like to share with our viewers about you or your work?
I mean, Uh, I'm excited for you guys to experience the film. Vic, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me and to ask such intentional questions. Again, like I can't thank you enough for taking the time to also do your research on me and the project. So that goes a long way. And I just wish you all the best. I wish the festival like a huge success. I really appreciate you guys making the time to connect with me.